How can we build a climate resilient Africa? So, here are some of the practical solutions and recommendations for Kenya and beyond in the whole world. Because climate change is a major threat to African countries, and Kenya is no exception. Our country is experiencing more frequent severe weather events, which are having a significant impact on the economy, the environment, and the health of its citizens. So it is imperative that Kenya and other African countries take concrete steps to build resilience to climate change and mitigate its effects. So I want to discuss some practical solutions, recommendations, and a way forward for Kenya and other African countries in the world to implement. So number one is adaptation strategies, because one of the most effective ways to build climate resilience is through adaptation strategies. These strategies can include developing drought-resistant crops, investing in early warning signs, symptoms, and improving water management practices. For example, in Kenya, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, is working with farmers to introduce drought-resistant crops like sorghum and millet, which require less water than traditional crops like maize. Number two is renewable energy, because it's another key strategy for building climate resilience by investing in renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and geothermal power. By reducing reliance on fossil fuels, we can not only reduce their carbon footprint, but also improve energy security and reduce dependence on imported fuel. Because in Kenya, for example, the government has set a target of achieving 100% renewable energy by 2030, and it has made significant progress towards this goal. So, for example, the country's largest wind farm, located in Turkana, has a capacity of 310 megawatts and can supply electricity to over 1 million households. And number three is forest conservation, because forests play a crucial role in mitigating the effects of climate change by absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. However, deforestation remains a major problem in many African countries, including Kenya. And to combat this, African countries should invest in forest conservation efforts, such as reforestation and improved land management practices. For example, in Kenya, the government has launched a campaign to plant 2 billion trees by 2022, and it's also working with communities to establish community managed forests. Number four is water conservation, because water scarcity is a growing problem in many African countries, and climate change is expected to exacerbate this issue. To address this, African countries should invest in water conservation measures such as rainwater harvesting, drip irrigation, and improved water management practices. For example, in Kenya, the government has launched a campaign to build water ponds and dams in drought-prone areas, which has helped to improve access to water for both households and agriculture. So some of the recommendation is number one, increased funding for climate adaptation, because African countries need more funding to implement climate adaptation strategies, and developed countries should fulfill their pledge to provide $100 billion per year in climate finance to developing countries. And countries should also allocate more resources towards climate adaptation measures and explore innovative financing mechanisms such as green bonds. Number two is strengthen regional cooperation, because climate change is a global problem that requires a coordinated response. African countries should strengthen regional cooperation to share knowledge, resources, and best practices. For example, the African Union has established the African Climate Policy Center, which provides technical assistance and support to African countries on climate change issues. Number three is to mainstream climate resilience into development planning. African countries should integrate climate resilience into their development planning processes, and this can be done by ensuring that climate considerations are taken into account in all sectors, from agriculture to infrastructure to health. For example, Kenya has developed a national climate change action plan that mainstreams climate resilience into all sectors of the economy. To build climate resilience in Africa, we need a comprehensive and coordinated approach that involves all stakeholders. African governments, civil society organizations, and the private sector must work together to develop and implement practical solutions that address the specific challenges faced by their countries. We must also address the issue of waste management in African countries. Waste management is a significant contributor to greenhouse emissions. And this should also apply to all regions of the world. But I'm using Africa as a case study. And as waste in landfills decomposes and releases methane. And methane is a potent greenhouse gas. And its effects on the environment are far more significant than that of carbon dioxide. It is therefore essential that African countries develop sustainable waste management practices that can mitigate the release of methane gas into the atmosphere. One potential solution is the use of biogas as a source of energy. Biogas is produced from the decomposition of organic matter in waste and can be used to generate electricity or as fuel for cooking and heating. African countries must explore the use of biogas as an alternative to fossil fuels, which are a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions. Biogas production can also create job opportunities for people in the waste management sector. So esteemed delegates, leaders, and fellow members of the global community. I am Ria from Nairobi, Kenya, here today to address the COP28 Summit on Climate Change. I am honored to be part of this gathering, and I thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak. Climate change has been one of the most significant challenges that we have faced as a planet. We are already witnessing the devastating impacts of a warming world, from rising sea levels to more frequent natural disasters. The recent IPCC report has warned us of the severe consequences that will occur if we don't take immediate action. Climate change is not just an environmental issue, it is a humanitarian crisis that affects our livelihoods, health, and our future. As an African, I have witnessed the adverse effects of climate change firsthand. In Kenya, we are an agricultural country, and changes in rain patterns have led to droughts, affecting the livelihoods of millions of people who rely on agriculture as the backbone of our economy. The erratic rains have led to instances of flooding, which has caused loss of life and destruction of homes and infrastructure. These are just some of the impacts that climate change has had on our people, and it's only going to get worse if we don't act now. I'm involved with the Act Now film and We Don't Have Time community, which aims to solve the climate crisis. We are a global movement that uses our voice to influence society and reach leaders to discuss solutions. We believe that individual actions such as reducing our energy use and cutting carbon footprint can make a difference. We need to turn down heating, turn off lights and appliances not being used, replace light bulbs with low energy lights, and respect and protect green spaces such as parks and gardens. But individual action alone is not enough. Governments and businesses must take responsibility for the damage they're causing to the climate. We need to see urgent action from decision makers to address the climate crisis. And this summit should not just be another meeting, it should be a turning point, a moment in history where we come together and take bold action to mitigate the effects of climate change. The first global stocktake of the implementation of the Paris Accord will conclude at COP28, and it is a critical opportunity for us to assess the world's collective progress towards achieving its climate goals. We need to be ambitious in our targets, and we must work together to achieve them. We need to cut our emissions, invest in renewable energy, and promote sustainable practices across all sectors. As we gather here in Dubai, we must acknowledge that the UAE is one of the leading countries in the world when it comes to sustainability and green energy. So the UAE has set ambitious targets for renewable energy, and it's working hard to achieve them. We must learn from the UAE examples and work together to accelerate the transition to a low carbon economy. We must also recognize that climate change is a global issue and it requires global solutions. The climate crisis affects us all, and we must all take responsibility for our actions. We need to build bridges, not walls, and work together to find solutions to this global problem. We need to collaborate, share knowledge and resources, and support each other as we move towards a more sustainable future. In conclusion, African countries must take urgent action to combat climate change. We must prioritize sustainable development practices and invest in renewable energy sources such as solar, wind, and geothermal energy. We must also address the issue of waste management and explore alternative sources of energy such as biogas. The global community must support African countries in their efforts to combat climate change by providing financial and technical assistance. I urge all the leaders and decision makers present here today to take bold action to address the climate crisis. We need to act now, and we need to act together. We have the technology, the knowledge, and the resources to make a difference. Let us use this opportunity to make history and pave the way for a more sustainable future. Together, we can create a sustainable future for generations to come, one that is free from the devastating effects of climate change. As the world prepares to convene in Dubai for the COP28 summit, let us renew our commitment to low emissions and climate resilient world and take bold action towards achieving our climate goals. The time to act is now, and let's take urgent action which is needed to combat its devastating effects on climate change, especially in Africa. And this is Zakaria Riandongo. Thank you for listening and have a good day as we try to implement and work on acting now to solve the climate crisis. Thank you.